Hey everybody, this is Professor Lilly, and I just want to talk about the next and also the last major assignment of the semester, which is the Tech Evolution assignment. And so you definitely need to familiarize yourself with this tab here. It's the last one before the final exam. And so the idea behind this assignment is to give you a lot of flexibility, about 10 days to work on it. And it's going to be a little bit more detailed, just in terms of what it's asking you to do. So even though you have 10 days, I reckon estimate this project will take you, I don't know, um, maybe 4 or 5 hours. And so it's not a lot of time. I mean, kind of effective hours. I mean, you might end up spending more time than that, or kind of less, depending on how engaged and how intense your research is. So, in terms of the tab here, the orientation, this just gives you a basic overview here. Um, and then the details are in this tab here, or this section here. I'll get to all this in a second, but there are 5 specific sections you need to have in your wiki page. So we're going to continue to use the wiki tool, and so the idea here is, and I'll get into our chapter as well. The chapter is going to be chapter 8 on evolution of media systems. And the idea is that media formats, media platforms evolve from one thing to another. So, for example, radio, um, when the technology for television came around, the radio format was already very structured in terms of the different types of shows they had, the different types of talent. And so television is an evolution of radio in many different ways. Partially, it's an evolution of the actual technology itself, because the broadcasting of the signals that they figured out how to do with television is our next steps after figuring out how to broadcast radio signals. But also, just in terms of the format, by the time television came along, radio is very solidified. So they have like variety shows and comedy shows and drama shows and news shows. And so when they were trying to figure out, well, what kind of programming are we going to do on this new television medium, they automatically just took what they had already known and learned from television. And also, the industry itself was already well structured with like ABC and NBC. Those are networks that started off first with radio. Um, and then and when the technology for television came along, they bought the technology and moved it into what we by the 50s, 60s, and 70s and 80s knew of television. And then we can even see cable evolution as another step of that. Subscription services like HBO, another set, satellite television, and then even Netflix today is, in certain aspects, ways an evolution of television as well. Um, so, and I'll come back to this chapter. Actually, while we're here, what I want you to read is read the beginning section, where it kind of really lays that out of how media evolved, and really the certain mediums, such as the printing press, had a huge, gigantic impact on the history of the world. And so, and as technologies evolved, they all allowed for different things to happen, and for societies to form themselves in different ways. And we'll get into that in a second. So, in terms of reading, focus on this opening chapter. Um, I would skirt through the printing press and rights of broadcasting. If you end up choosing a topic that has to do with broadcasting, you can come back to here, and the same with the internet. But then focus again on diffusion of information, and social and economic implications. And so, if in your research, if you can actually cite something from the textbook, please do. So, the first thing, once you feel like you have an understanding of what this whole project is all about, come to the sign up wiki. So there's 3 wikis here, and I've separated them with other items just so you don't get confused. So in the first wiki here is just to be able to sign up and say, this is what the topic I am going to do, because I don't want people in the same section to double up. And then I have two wikis, one for each section to actually post your research project. So come to the sign up wiki here, and there's only two pages. There's a page for the 1215 section, and there's a one for the 140 section. So find your section, and I've suggested these topics. So if you want to choose a topic, all you do is come in. Everyone can edit. So hit edit, and if I want to do Netflix, I can come in here and put the names of my team members. So in this project, you can do it by yourself, um, or you can do it in a team as large as 3 students who know how to collaborate with, like you know how to communicate with them. And obviously, I expect more. Not necessarily a doubling from those teams, because collaboration itself takes time to do it well. So, but I expect more out of those teams that have more than one member. And so come through here and grab a topic. So we have Netflix, YouTube, Spotify. For Spotify, you could do other music services too if you want to, like Pandora. But right now, Spotify is the kind of more popular one. Facebook, and Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, Xbox. Xbox as the company, or Microsoft, wasn't always the biggest one in online games. So that's why I say here it's more about online game systems and the evolution of the medium. For example, you could talk about innovation within the Nintendo company, even though Xbox is not Nintendo. Um, so grab a topic, just so that we know, because I don't want people to be doubling up. Um, and then for your actual research project, in whichever section you're in, each group, whether it's a group of 1 or a group of 3, will have its own wiki page, and you can come back and you can multiple times. Just with that in mind, I want everybody to have started their page and start working on some of the research by next Tuesday, April 21st. And so that's kind of just a benchmark, making sure you're getting into the research, because if you try to do it all the day, like the day it's actually due, Tuesday, April 28th, you're going to spend all day working on assignments. So, if you really want to, there is going to be a little bit of a grading aspect, because when I create the rubric, there will be a penalty if you don't have it something by the 21st on your wiki page, and that's just because I want to get in there and give you a little bit of feedback. So if we had a class, before we had like an on-campus class, then at one point you would come into class and you would show me your laptop and say, well, this is what I've done and this is what I've done, and then I would say, oh, okay, well, make sure you do this and this, and I would give you some ideas. So that's what we'll do, is I will comment on your wiki page during the week after Tuesday the 21st. That's next week. And then you'll have a whole nother week to round out your research and finish it up by Tuesday the 28th. Technically speaking, this is the last week of class. And during that week in class, we will have a live Zoom session for both classes, and that's just to be able to talk about the final exam. The final exam is going to be a Moodle exam, and it's going to be essay based. So I decided not to do all the multiple choice and all that stuff. So there's nothing other than fully participating in this these projects we've been doing. There's nothing you can really do to prepare for the final exam until we talk about it that week. So don't worry about that. But we will have a live Zoom session just to make sure that everyone understands what the parameters of the final exam are. So, that being said, you have it's really more than 10 days to work on this assignment. So this is just like the basic guidelines, but all the meat of the assignment is down here. And don't get fooled by this. I just put this. I'm going to show this in a second, but this video. But all the real nitty gritty guidelines are down here. So at the bottom underneath it. So there's a couple things I do want you to read. Like I said, from the from chapter 8 in the textbook, read the introduction and the importance of the printing press, and then browse through these. It kind of depends for the rise of broadcasting and the internet. It kind of depends on which topic you've chosen. So if you're doing something like Netflix, I mean, not Netflix, Facebook or Twitter, then you might read more in depth about what he's talking about the internet. If broadcast, Dean, I would if you're doing Netflix, then I would do that. I want everyone to read about diffusion of innovation because it gives some turns about how new technologies kind of become popular and expand, and it uses these important terms that have been identified to understand how any type of technology rolls out in terms of new innovation, and then early adapters like way back in the day, if your parents were maybe one of the first people to get a Facebook account or the first people to get a new screen, flat screen TV when that was like a new technology. And so this is like a predictable curve for any technology where you start with early adapters, then other people learn from the early adapters, and then you have majority adapters embracing it to into their life. So like if you're going to think about Facebook, for example, you would think that we're like beyond this. Like, so if there's a technology and your grandparents are entering it, then you can know that they are usually late majority adapters or even laggards. And to the point where Facebook is being replaced, or like people in your generation are not using it anymore for a variety of reasons, and using other technologies to do certain similar things, means that we're already at this stage. Now, if we were having in class conversation, a lot of people were like, I don't want to do Facebook because it's not significant. Don't remember that your generation is not the only generation in the world, and Facebook is billions of people, right? And if you only have a planet with so many billions of people, and we're talking about billions of people actually using Facebook, it's still the most popular single medium platform now on the planet. So, granted, that's partially because we're at the laggard stage. So they are actively engaged in how are we going to evolve, expand what we're doing in Facebook to make it continually to be relevant. And part of buying up Instagram is part of that, right? So most of you probably know that Facebook owns Instagram, um, and they're trying to focus that on obviously on a visual, photo-based medium, and sharing medium that's a little bit different than what you can do in different social networks than you would have in Facebook. Um, for Okay, so anyway, that's what I want you to focus on when you probably should start reading chapter 8 after you've chosen which medium which topic you're gonna have, which technology you're gonna focus on for your research. Okay, so um, the next thing I want you to do is, and I do want you to read the medium theory essay, and I'm going to talk about that when we get into this specific sections of your project. Then I'll come back to that. But it's right here, and then this reading here is if you choose Spotify, then I would definitely read this. But this just is a nice reading. I'll go ahead and open it up, because it just gives you really good perspective. I'm specifically thinking about how an evolution of like an area of media communication, so, and how it evolved from the phonograph, the radio, and all the different aspects, not necessarily just the technological aspect, but the sociological aspect as well. So it kind of gives a good kind of flow of what's Dr. Lilly talking about technology evolution. What does that mean? So, we want to think about whatever topic you've chosen. What did it evolve out of? Like the example I gave before, Netflix evolved out of television, which had lots of different iterations of evolution from the 1940s and 50s, with different things being added on it changing its position in the world and its importance, and then it changes again because new technologies of internet and streaming challenge it and kind of change the format. So when I say Netflix is television, I don't mean it's like literally the box in the corner of the room, but more like Netflix has evolved in terms of how are people getting audiovisual storytelling, professional audiovisual storytelling. Well, they used to get it from the box in the room, and now they get it, or a lot of them get it from these streaming services. All right, let's go back. And even before, like I said, even before that, television itself evolved from radio. Um, okay, so and again, when you start your wiki page, make sure you use the correct section here when you start it. So where do you start? So after you sign up for your topic, start to think about how did your technology evolve and how has it changed since then. So you want to basically start with doing some Google and database searches. And I want you, and really, I mean, when you're doing it, really focus on these sections here. So before I didn't really have this much structure in explaining what I wanted. And since we're doing it for almost 2 weeks, I wanted to make it um, and especially since I'm not there physically twice a week to remind you how to do it or for you to ask questions, I wanted to give you more structure. So in the grading schema for this project, I will be looking at, does the person answer the questions? Does the person have the 5 sections? So I'm asking for 5 sections here. And do they hit the required aspects in each section? So in section 1, what we're looking for is an overview and history of your platform. Okay, so for most of you, we're thinking about you signed up for a company, right? So I mean, you could focus on the particular company, like when did Facebook start, and who were the main characters in helping to come up with that idea, that innovation. Now, in the textbook, chapter 8, innovation is a big aspect to it, but I don't want to get you to get overly caught up and the kind of aha moment or like single entrepreneur or innovator aspect. Let me show you this real quick.
1921, a sharecrop in Rigby, Idaho. A Mormon family, the Farnsworths, have recently moved in. Teenage son, Philo, is expected to follow in his father's footsteps and become a farmer. But he has other ideas. Philo Farnsworth grows up in a time when you have these great lone inventors who are conquering the world. You had Thomas Edison and Alexander Graham Bell, and they become his heroes.
He was filled with nervous energy, and he was always tinkering and trying to invent things.
And a chance discovery in the farm attic is about to change his life. A collection of books and magazines dedicated to scientific advancements. Like radio, the miracle of sound transported through the air.
Okay, so Philo Farnsworth is one of the innovators credited with helping discover certain scientific aspects and technological aspects that led to the development of television, and so it's fine and great for you to write about the big innovators of these technological platforms, these companies that you've chosen to research. And in the overview, you can talk about that, like how they got to the point where they are now. And I do want you to talk about specific iterations and what type of services they rolled out, because Facebook today is obvious, especially with Messenger, and then they've added in Instagram, is way different than Facebook was when Zuckerberg first started programming it in college. So do focus on those parts in chapter one, but I also in the other section, or rather section one, but in the other sections, I want you to get beyond that and think about the larger kind of sociological implications of the technology. Um, and if you kept on watching, and you can certainly watch the rest of this video, you learn that there are all sorts of other innovators who are working on trying to design something like a radio for images, which television came into. So if you did like if you went to the Wikipedia page on the innovation of television, you would find that there are all sorts of companies and individuals who are credited with, who are doing some of the same things at the same time, and they learn things from each other, and and uh, and they all kind of or not necessarily working together, but working at the same time. And then finally, big companies adopted some of those innovations and technologies to be able to mass produce what we know as television today. Um, so the idea is that we're trying to complicate beyond the idea of Zuckerberg in his college dorm room and look what it became, because he's so brilliant. It's not just the brilliant idea of one innovation. It's how a whole industries come into creating large platforms like this, and then also the users, how people use it in terms of deciding where it goes and the impact it has on our society. So okay, so back to section one here. So in these, take time with your wiki pages. You can include infographics, photos, and the way to cite. I do expect you to cite, all the places where you're finding information is just to link to whatever page, or if you refer to the textbook. This is a textbook chapter 8 and then link to any pages. In the grading, I am going to be looking that you're actually citing places or websites and facts that have information on these on the topic. So in this first one, we are looking at discuss forces that played a role in the early innovation, such as getting seed money or having a group coming together and having like the first iteration that was published to Facebook, for example, and who were the early adopters of it. And so, what's the difference between where it started and where it is today? So, how many people were doing Facebook in the for early years of it compared to now? So, this all applies to whatever medium or company that you chose to sign up for. So, section 2, we're looking for you to go beyond your company. So I have the question here: what did your technology evolve from? So if, like I say here, if you chose Netflix, then you're thinking it back to television before, and at what point did we jump from television to cable to having DVRs and then the streaming services, and if there's still some kind of like other technology that still exists today, for example, with Spotify, the radio is still out there, right? You can still you can buy MP3s, and in fact, I mean, Spotify does, encourage you to do that. I'm pretty sure that there's paths to get into buying actual albums through them. But so why is it that this technology is evolved even though the other one still exists? Maybe the other one doesn't exist. It kind of depends. One that I didn't put in there that someone could choose is the smartphone, which really kind of does all these things, but specifically kind of evolved from the home phone, right? But it also combines the home or the personal camera, right? So when I was I guess in college, if I wanted to take photos, I didn't break out my phone. Phones didn't have, or people didn't even have mobile phones then. But even the first mobile phones didn't have the camera function, right? So people literally took around. It was a small, compact personal camera. So the cell phone kind of combines that in there too, which gives it a whole kind of other trajectory of the things that it evolved from in terms of the photography aspect of it. Okay, so again, so in Sec 2, we're really looking at what did your tech evolve from thinking, you know, decades before. Um, and then how is it an innovation? So in some of these, you're going to have to really think about it. And I'm going to get to medium theory in a second, but medium theory will help you to do that because it goes into thinking about how certain technologies allow for extending the senses, human senses, and how they built different technologies built on each other. Um, Okay, so section 3. Might be a little bit more difficult. So think to the children's media reading that we did, and how there were all the different laws and policies associated with children's media that we focused on. And so here we're looking at similar regulatory forces. And so for whatever your technology is, you're going to have to think about, well, how are they being regulated by the government or not? What are they required to do? Um, so with Spotify, they have to make agreements with record companies to get the copyright permissions to be able to play those, and so they have agreements to be able to send like tiny amounts of money for every time a song that is heard. So that's copyright. Um, for YouTube, they also have to enforce copyright. So if I like take a movie that I don't own the copyright to and just throw it on YouTube, then YouTube's gonna identify that and take it down. Otherwise, that they will get in trouble from the movie companies. YouTube doesn't allow pornography on YouTube. Now, the question is, we know that pornography in general is legal, so why aren't they allowing that or doing that? Is that an issue of ethics, or is that an issue of law? So that's one thing I want you to find out. And so you're going to have to think about what are the regulatory forces in the United States or global agreements that are kind of shaping what these companies are allowed to do. So, for example, Facebook is getting more and more pressure to crack down on trolls and bot accounts. Okay, so the section 4 is where you're going to have to read medium theory. Okay, and again, the link is right here. And I have there's a little Wikipedia page someone created. So medium theory has a lot to do with the theories of Marshall McLuhan, and his idea was that the what each medium allows people to do can have a huge impact in actually changing the way societies work. So, for example, with the printing press, all of a sudden, the church no longer had a monopoly on knowledge, and so lots of different types of knowledge were be able to flourish, including in areas of commerce. So the ability to be able to print your ledgers or print certain ways of doing things and send them to other people, to be able to put laws on books and for people to read them, kind of really opened up lots of different ways of kind of being in society, different businesses, and also for people to be kind of more enlightened and think kind of deeper about how the world works. And so, if you in medium theory, the essay gets into the idea that each medium kind of extends the senses of humans. So, um, for example, the printing press, what does that extend? Well, it extends in particular, it extends memory, right? So you don't have to remember every single thing. If you write it down in the book, you can come back to the book. Similar to certainly Google does that for us today. It extends our memory because we don't have to remember all sorts of things. Um, it the book allows for the extension of a human voice, right? So, I mean, I can't. Before that, in tribal societies, you would get together and you would tell a story or you would give information, and without the written language, there was no way to remember that other than through your brain. So now it extends the books extend your voices, and you could send a book with or not just not necessarily a book, but just a scroll of here's what I want you to do across the ocean. So you can send lots of sources of information. And one of the arguments made in the essay is that empires like the Roman Empire were strengthened and extended by the having a written language where they could give commands and make ledgers and all the sorts of things of being able to operate a huge empire such as that. Um, so your goal in this section is to think about what uh, senses does my technology extend. And I do want you to give a one paragraph summary. For each of these sections, I say how many paragraphs I think it will take to kind of give, to fully answer those questions. And so these are kind of limits. So for example, section 3, it's going to probably take you at least 2 paragraphs. And this one, I want at least 1 paragraph summary from the essay of what the main points are. And then kind of start to think about what senses does your technology extend. Um, uh, and so, for example, Twitter is a good example. What does that extend? Well, it extends, in particular, a human voice, right? It's a really easy way to get out a thought, or it extends in terms of evolution of a medium. It extends the news, right? So people can get out a little bit of news really quickly with Twitter. It kind of deals with issues of distance, so it extends your voice, extends your ears in a kind of way because people can send videos all across the world. So really think about what, and I give you some examples here. So sight, ears, voice, memory, time. Um, so you're really thinking about what, and partially this can explain why these different technologies are so popular at this point in human society. And that's where we get to in the last section, section 5, where I want you to think right now, what is the kind of significance or the impact, the global impact of this particular technology? Like, what is it allowing to happen? Um, and you can, you know, certainly in your research, like if you were doing Twitter, you would find the example of how it took a big role in the Arab Spring in terms of getting out information in societies that were censored societies, and it helped people to learn about different protest movements that were going on. Each one of the technologies, each one of the ones that you have a pretty big impact at this point in the world we live in. So I want you to really talk about what it is economically, socially, culturally, and then what is the future of that technology. So in the next generation, like if you have children, will your children still use this technology, or do you think there will be something different that kind of replaces it or does it better? And what do you think that will be? So that's the last section there. And again, I say here, make sure you have links to your cited sources um, and infographics, photos. You could do video embeds if you find an informational video on on YouTube. Then definitely do that. So I'll leave it at that. Again, you start here in the sign up wiki. There's a page for each section. And then start your research from there. And I do want everyone to have their wiki page started by next Tuesday, the 21st. Again, so that the more you have done on it at that point, then the better feedback I can give you. Obviously, you can email individually and ask me a specific question, but I'm going to try to come to each one of your pages and kind of give you a comment and some suggestions. And then you have a whole another week until you wrap up the work. There are not student comments. You don't have to comment on each other's wiki pages. If you want to, that's great. Like if you have a particular insight on that particular technology, then you can certainly chime in there. You can give comments on the wiki pages, but it's not required in terms of the grade. But if you want to, you can do that. And again, everything is here. And I went through the chapter 8 lecture, and basically when I was talking about the textbook, are the main things that I wanted to talk about. So I don't want to bog you down with anything extra. I really want you to focus on this assignment, which is pretty comprehensive, right? So again, I think it would be hellish for you to try to do it all in one day. It would take a long time. So do it in pieces is the best strategy for success. Okay, so if you have any questions, just email me. And I hope you enjoy the topic. So pick something that you're interested in. Put your passion into it. Enjoy it, and then we'll wrap that up on the last week of class, and then we will talk about the final exam. So I hope everyone's doing well. Take care, and reach out to me if you have any questions about anything.